What is interesting and something that I've learned recently in my experience at ByteDance is that you see L&D as a risk management function. When you work in an industry where you are talking about sexual abuse, you're talking about trafficking, you're talking about toxicity, bullying, you need to take it seriously. But at the same time, you want to engage your learners. So it is a very tricky balance. The safety component is crucial. People need to feel that when they navigate these platforms, they are safe. The content is safe. Their children are safe. How do we build a training that really addresses some of the biases of human moderation? And at the same time, we need to train our algorithms to also evolve to get smarter so it can help filtering some of that content. This obsession of retaining people, I think is also playing against the sustainability of the business and actually keeping talent. An individual will feel successful if they can change careers or at any time.
Take one, Mark.
Finish the sentence. The future of learning is...
The future of learning is...
Everyone needs to listen to what Daniel just said.
Oh, mamma mia.
Hi, I'm Shauna David, host of Leaders in Learning, and in this episode, I sit down with Daniel Garcia Alfizi. Daniel's academic and professional pursuits have taken him all over the world, giving him a unique, diverse, and global perspective that's truly reflected in his work. His contributions have impacted enterprises, organizations including Tigo, IKEA, Amazon, and most recently, ByteDance. I'm super excited to dig into Daniel's experience with these big brands, get his hot take on topics like trust and risk in the TikTok era, and find out how he thinks about growing talent while balancing local learning needs with global learning programs. I'm sure we're going to have a great conversation, so let's dive in. Welcome to Leaders in Learning, Daniel. How are you today?
I'm really good. Thank you for having me.
So excited to dig into the rich, diverse experience that you have. And I want to start with a question around IT and education. It sounds like the stars were aligned in your career where over the past few decades, we've had this convergence of IT and education, and that's had a big impact on things like mobile learning.
Well, it definitely helps.
Okay.
Having a background in IT and psychology and having those skills are definitely enablers and create kind of the conditions for really understanding some of the tech behind learning and some of the adult ways of learning. So it is for sure an advantage, but it definitely helped to fast track, and it helped me to fast track and get into new technologies such as mobile learning, e-learning, and so on.
Can I talk a little bit more about you and your background? Because one of the things that I've observed as I'm meeting with a bunch of people through Leaders in Learning is that there is no right way. There's no ideal path. And a lot of the people that I talked to, including myself, didn't know that learning was a craft while they were in school. And you, on the other hand, your background is rich with this education, master's in educational psychology. You've got that rich background. But your path to executive leadership seems really unconventional from an outside looking in. And so I'm curious, were there moments in your career, pivotal things, choices you made that others may have thought were too risky, but you leaned in and it has landed you where you are?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was lucky enough to know that education was a passion for me, but I didn't know what was the path. I wasn't sure whether corporate learning was going to be the place I would land.
Right.
But for me, it was really finding a way to create impact and really make a difference. Maybe 20 years ago in this experience in Italy, almost playing with mobile and e-learning and these very new authoring tools, I discovered that, wow, there is a lot of potential in what we are building here. One of our customers was actually IKEA, the
Oh, yeah.
the
IKEA.
furnishing
Yeah.
company. But I was lucky enough to move to Sweden and to really be part of their first digital learning center. So they were really trying to standardize their practices, centralizing, creating the first score-based learning objects. So for them, it was a very new space to get into, and being able to help building that foundation, reaching more than 400 stores, more than 150,000 employees, and really building the kind of the knowledge base. So those were thousands of learning objects that we managed to.
Because it's a fully centralized workforce, to your point, around like from supply chain right through distribution, manufacturing, frontline employees in the store.
Absolutely.
Many types of roles.
Absolutely. And the idea here is to really understand how can you unify that learning experience.
Okay.
There is a huge talent mobility across companies nowadays, and at the time IKEA was really strong at making sure that we could rotate talent to different places, but they were realizing that the content, the experience, how they went about learning was not really the same. So that was not helping fast tracking some of their adapting to a new role or a new location. So this is why the learning center came to place to help with that.
I heard two things that are really critical, I think, for our audience to hear, which is one of them is the importance of knowledge management and how creating a consistent, centralized place where people have access to trustworthy, reliable information is key, especially if you're in a growth organization and you're looking to expand to new markets, new footprints. And plus, for all of those people with the instructions as a user, we want that consistency. Otherwise, we would have a hard time, right? So there's a downstream impact to internal knowledge management and how that flows into the experience for customers. And so knowledge management, very important. The second component that sounds like you were successful with IKEA, which is so important, is this concept of diversity of roles. And while the knowledge may be the same, how these individuals are applying that knowledge in their day-to-day is so different. So can you expand a little bit on some of the tricks you learned to make what they know versus what they do, and make that real for the supply chain person versus the customer experience person?
One of the things that happens at IKEA, but also companies that have very strong presence in different markets, is that they have maybe service centers or they have offices, and they equip themselves with learning or L&D professionals that are able to deliver content, facilitate, create. So sometimes they don't wait for this corporate team to get ready and cascade down and all of that. And to be honest, sometimes that can be a very slow process. So what we tried to do was really to bring those more federated teams together and say, okay, how, you have the know-how in terms of what's relevant for your audiences. You are really close to the customer, to the front line, and we are not. At the same time, we understand what the company wants to highlight and drive as a competency, as a capability to ensure that we are going the right direction in the future. And combining that with the ability to localize content, really understand those nuances, and a little bit of trial and error too, just to see, if we were resonating with the audience and the content was really applicable. But then we learned quickly that people appreciated the fact that we got out of our way not only to translate content, but to localize. And localizing means that you add that even slang that is local, that and of course you use image and videos and actors that are representative of that audience,
local market. And you, because of your diverse experiences working and living abroad. I think you've lived in like all the continents except for maybe Antarctica.
Yeah.
I don't think you've lived there yet. But how has that shaped your worldview? How do you think about problems differently with that like backpack of context that you've built?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Basically, what it does is it helps you anticipate, looking around corners, and accelerate, avoid some of the mistakes. And it's also an effort to educate your team members around what it means to really be globally aware, but ensuring that you are making a local impact.
There's two things. One that you mentioned earlier around the value of a federated model, like recognizing that a lot of the knowledge in organization is typically spread. And so having a federated model allows you to have like a bit of a centrifugal force. That's how Josh Burson described it. I talked to him a couple weeks ago. And it allows you to balance that like expertise of the craft, high alignment to business strategy, but puts the power in the arms and the hands and the fingers of the people who know what the reality is on the job. And if you can find that balance, you can deliver high impact learning that can change the course of lives. And I want to dig into like the organization career framework, because traditional career frameworks really value, you mentioned environments, creating the right environment for this type of work to flourish and for people to flourish. And most organizations historically have had very linear career paths. The only way up is if I become a people leader. But I'm really good at software engineering and I don't want to be a people leader. But I kind of am forced to because of the way the system of the career framework is designed. Sometimes, or at least more and more, I'm seeing companies do what I call the Y-shaped career framework, where you can grow as a technical expert or as a people leader, and there's delineating paths at some point. So my question to you is, how does an organization, a CHRO, a functional leader, an HR practitioner, how do they know whether they should keep a linear career framework or think about expanding into a Y-shaped career framework?
It is very interesting because I kind of at a corporate level, there are tools and there are people really dedicated to understand how the industry is going to shape up in the future and what is needed in order to continue to be maybe a market leader or disrupt some kind of industry, or maybe open up a new revenue stream. So they do have powerful insight that can help. And a lot of times that translates into capabilities that they feel they need to build in business. So that is one of the streams that really feed the work that we do. On the other hand, there is this intelligence of all our employees on the ground that often also know what's coming.
That's right.
Understand what's the new wave. So something that we are trying to do lately is to say an individual will feel successful if they can change careers or at any time.
Interesting.
And meaning that creating those conditions for employees to thrive and really say, I've been doing this for a while, but now I want to do this. And as long as there is intention and some kind of alignment and there is a contribution behind, that kind of groundbreaking approach will often lead to positive results because they do know a lot of stuff that those kind of more high-level insights are not able to capture. And when companies are able to really match those two components, that is success. And I think this is a paradigm shift that we need to go to, especially because a lot of those talent that might maybe shift careers and leave, they will love the company that allowed them to do that. So they are not only going to speak volumes about that company, but they might come back with a richer experience, and then you also benefit from that.
There's like a flywheel of talent, right? And it's
this obsession of retaining
Yeah.
people, I think it's also playing against the sustainability of the business and actually keeping talent.
Right.
So the moment you lose up a little bit that and say like, I want to retain you because I value your skills, your contribution, what you do, your attitude. But feel free to go. I want to give you everything you need if you want to go.
That's right.
And that is so powerful in an industry that mobility is just part of the game.
I mean, you talk about, there's an element of trust that comes from that, because you're saying to the employee, I just want you to have the skills and I want to help you be successful.
Yes.
If that's here, fantastic. If that means somewhere else, then I hope you come back one day, because maybe that company's in a better position to offer what you need. But there's so much trust that's gleaned from doing that. There's a couple of stats that are running through my mind now. One, 44% of HR folks don't think they have good career frameworks, which just tells you something if the HR folks designing it. Another thing is high potentials. They typically will leave within 2 years if they don't even have lateral, to your point around matching skills to opportunities. And the third crazy stat that's coming to mind as you share this is 75% of folks are saying they're having a hard time filling jobs. So there's a bit of a perfect storm happening now, which everyone needs to listen to what Daniel just said, because being able to match the capabilities in your business with the humans and the problems you have to solve, it's like talent density, and getting talent density right is so beneficial for the business and for the human and for your employer brand. Any tips on how to do that?
It is common for the L&D function to kind of forget about their own development and their own, how do they really grow their own capabilities. And so sometimes that play against, because what they do is that they jump from trend to trend, but there's not that kind of steady understanding of how the function is growing. Sometimes it's funny. I like to ask my teams, just think. And I go to a window and they ask me, what are you doing? I'm thinking. And sometimes like you are supposed to be in your laptop, just, if you're not doing that, you are not working. Right. And it's like, but I need to think. Yeah. And thinking in front of my screen, it doesn't help. Yeah. So I take a walk, I look at the window, like whatever works. Yeah. But just think about things and think about how you can develop, how you can learn, how you can tap into maybe having a new a mentor or someone that can really help you grow. So that is one of the reasons maybe why we get some kind of stuck into something.
It's a simple thing, but this notion of productivity means this.
Yes.
That's not necessarily true, right? You got to relish in the problem. I have a buddy who often says the best thoughts come in the shower thoughts, because it's it is not true that you are going to get the result by just hammering at the problem. Mm-hmm. It's funny that you talk about emerging learning practitioners shifting. Now everybody's how do I cut efficiencies with AI? Mm-hmm. Without doing the work of the foundational talent architecture and all of that stuff. How do you as a people leader create those on a micro level? We've talked a lot kind of globally, but you as a people leader, you've got a big team that has really important work in the role that you're in today. How do you kind of create that flexibility, that autonomy that you're describing that you need for yourself?
There is a lot that comes to listening and learning about the talent. What's interesting, what really makes them tick, and what are their passions. Kind of matching key really crucial priors with something that is already interesting for them. And that requires really spending time to getting to know them. Yes. and listen to what their interests are. At the same time, it's also about ensuring that they are not jumping into solutions, that they talk to the business in a way that they become really curious about what the problem is, that they learn how to make the right questions, and they come back and try to really draw different approaches or solutions rather than that, taking notes and saying, oh yeah, I got you. You want people in this coaching program. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to enroll everyone in that.
Yes, that order taking.
Order taking. Right. Oh, yes. That happens at every level.
It really does.
Right.
Yeah.
And it also happens because leaders have been exposed to education.
Right.
Through their careers.
Yeah.
Like everyone, like in the corporate world, everyone went to school, everyone went to graduate studies, and they got certifications, masters, whatever. So their life experience tells them that they can tell you what they need. So they are not telling you what's the problem. They are telling you, this is what I want you to do. And the role of an L&D professional is actually to go back and make those right questions. And often leaders will be impressed by that because it helps them think about their problem in different ways.
Oh, I love that.
So that is, I think, one of the ways where L&D can really position themselves and add value.
I love that because there's an element of like, not only are we going to teach you something, we're actually probably going to help you become more productive and optimize your performance. There's nothing sexier than when you see like an instructional designer or somebody in the learning field asking prompting questions of the subject matter. Like, so what happens after X, Y, and Z? And then typically you will find like some sort of operational efficiency, a streamlining of processes. Maybe, Brenda in accounting was the person that everybody went to for the same question 10 times a day over 20 years. All of a sudden you've saved Brenda, you've saved money for the business, but it doesn't come without that like curiosity, the prompting, and to your point, like looking behind the request to dig into what the actual problem is.
And the interesting thing about that is that becoming curious about someone else and having what they call the follow-up questions is something that really transcends cultures. And a lot of people, when you are maybe in Dubai versus Luxembourg versus Miami or Sweden, which was my case, you are really thinking about, oh, this is a different culture, this is a different type of stakeholder, and you're already having all these invisible barriers, getting in the way. But as soon as you get into, I want to know more about you, and I'm going to ask those follow-up questions, and I want to really dig into that, it's just a normal conversation between two human beings that want to do the right thing.
Oh, I love that. I want to do the right thing. And I think about a little bit of research we've done about you and the amazing work you've done, that IT education background at the Millennial Project. So I'd love for you to tell us a bit around how that came to be, what is it, and any stories of impact that you can share.
Yeah. So that came about, it was led by Ericsson from Sweden, and they were partnering with the UN in the Millennial Projects. That was probably, I'm going to date myself here, but I would say 25 years ago.
Okay.
And, or a little bit less, to be honest.
That's fine. Nobody can Google it. It's okay.
And the idea behind that, as I mentioned before, was really to understand how mobile technologies could reach people in remote areas for different purposes. And in this case, it was how could we provide almost like performance support guides to midwives so they could really know what to do step by step when helping mothers during labor. We created this mobile learning, which I don't even know mobile learning was a term at the time.
Probably wasn't.
And it was this really small screen, and they could scroll down and see images, videos, and audio. Even the authoring tool for we developed that authoring tool
Okay.
in a few months just before that. And it was wonderful. At the time, I was the lead instructional designer for that tool because of my I will never consider myself tech or anything like that, but my IT background allowed me to understand a little bit more. So talking to the research guys that were developing the tool, we really managed to get something that was really working for them. And we saw an impact of maybe 35% reduction. And that was massive. It was a pilot at the time, but then it was deployed in other countries, in Rwanda, Uganda, DRC.
Goodness.
And it was very successful, and it made me very proud to be able to be part of that.
So 35% is a huge number, and it sounds like on the back of brand new emerging. Are you the person who invented e-learning? Is it you and your friends that work there that I have to thank? Because you're right, that wasn't prevalent, and it's so cool to see the work of giving that knowledge to actually change lives. Because having a baby is not easy. It is. I was talking to our producer Offset, and it is life. Your life is at risk when you are doing these things. And so
yes, absolutely,
putting that in the hands of people who can make a difference is huge.
Absolutely.
It's incredible. So you've talked a little bit about the worldview that you have, that you've built over time working in different places, that cultural sensitivity and awareness you have. We're in this environment where the world seems more closely connected than ever, but also very fragmented, very disjointed, which is an interesting juxtaposition. In your time working at some of the biggest global technology companies, TikTok, Amazon, I wonder if you have a secret or two that you could share with us learning folks about how to make learning just as addictive as social media. Any tips or secrets you can share?
I went to business school.
Okay.
So something that I copied from business school is the customer journey, and how marketing, the marketing machine works to really attract and acquire new customers.
Right.
And I realized it was a lot to do with that customer experience and understanding end to end what really matters for them. So I would say the first secret is really understanding your target audience and designing intentionally for what they really need and what they really want, and really drawing that journey even to the moment in which you might lose them, right? But how do they go through that journey? So building something equivalent when it comes to learning. And probably the other secret is really become very curious around that human being that wants to learn in a very authentic, transparent way. They'll get too attached to that business goal or that objective that we want to achieve. That is relevant. That for sure is going to make you shine in your next performance review process. But remember to stay close to what really matters for that learner, and I think that will make the difference.
Oh, that's such great advice. I love that your very human lens on fostering talent, and I think about all of the people around the world who won't have access to formal education, who won't know somebody who can get them an interview, and the career path may not seem clear. How do you find that diamond in the rough talent? How do you build a sustainable talent pipeline, especially in an emerging or unconventional corporate non-corporate environment?
So in my experience, there is a typical component of really understanding what are those future capabilities that we need to develop to ensure that the business stays, again, leading, growing, differentiating, and so on. probably something that I built as part of ensuring that success is to bring diversity into the team, to really grasp as many viewpoints as possible, meaning that you want to hear every voice and you want to hear every voice from the place that they are coming from. That is a key component of sustainability. The third component would be create the right conditions. A lot of people talk about engagement and talk about technology and this and that, but at the end, it's the sum of all these parts. And how those conditions become ideal for people to really tap into their desire to learn and to grow. It's not something that you can really pull. It's about, again, just creating that foundation to make that flourish. And the last component, which I think is probably less common, is show impact. If you want to sustain something, you want to show that is helping, that is giving you the results that you expect. So being able to report in any shape or form that whatever intervention you are designing is having that desired impact will make that effort also sustainable. And that is sometimes the part that we forget, and is the time when we get our budget cut off.
It's happened a lot over the last couple of years, right? You've seen a lot of teams in this craft change shape, change size, get de-scope.
Absolutely.
Try to rethink how they do all this.
Yeah, absolutely. And it has a lot to do with how do you show impact? How do you show that the work that you're putting in is actually contributing to the bottom line?
What I hear you saying is that measuring for not only continuous improvement, but just tracking how you're impacting the business is critical. That's storytelling, right? The same storytelling we need to hook our learners as to why this matters and how it will help them. You need to do that same storytelling with your business leaders.
Absolutely.
Show the proof in the pudding.
Absolutely. And one step forward that we've been trying to implement is how can we turn that data into business insights? Like, we want to provide recommendations too. So telling them this is a report, even if it's very a flashy dashboard that shows progression and indicates how factors and variables are moving, and you might have run all these very sophisticated analyses, is sometimes it's not enough. They want to hear, okay, so what do I do with this? And this is also kind of a stretch for someone in the profession in terms of saying, well, now that we have all this data, the insights and telling us that you might go this route, or this route, and these are the implications and how we can help you. And that step is sometimes missing.
It's hard.
But it's the difference in becoming that real, true partner for the
business partner, right?
Yes.
It's like you almost feel like that order taking would be a little easier right now, because now I have all these insights and I have a strategic voice to help direct what the next step is. And that's
absolutely
intimidating. A couple of weeks ago, I was talking to Maureen Lonergan, who is the VP of AWS, and they have this bold mission to train 29 million people for free by 2025. I hope I got that right. And so she mentioned, when we talked about how do you remove barriers and make education available for anyone, no matter where they're starting, no matter where they are. She talked about localization being really important. Of course, technology. I'm wondering if you have any other things that you would add to that list.
You really want to make sure that whatever you do, you run it in a smaller scale.
Okay.
You learn from that, and then you continue to scale up.
Is that what you found to be successful at when you launched the first corporate university in an emerging market? I understand that's a big project.
Absolutely. It is very easy, especially when you work in these companies that are all about scaling and reaching the many people as soon as we can, to design already, for that scaling process. And that is where you start to make mistakes, because again, you are kind of skipping some of those learnings that you can gain by starting a little bit small.
Okay.
And that is something that I learned even working in Africa, but also IKEA, which is, we they are everything about scaling,
Right.
but you really need to test your initiative first and do your research, talk to the experts, focus groups, that anything that works to really inform and continue growing and scaling. A lot of those things that you feel and you see that are an overnight success and have 60 million users, they have been 2 years on the testing on very small pockets of audiences before they really go at that level.
That is really great advice, especially if you're building a large scale university that's modularized and has curriculum based and performance based learning. It's really awesome that you're sharing that feedback, because we get a lot of pressure to ship fast, ship now. But if you slow down to speed up, you dig deep in the problem, understand your learners, you get to a better outcome.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about this era of like TikTok, right? And not even TikTok, just generally with the internet, like operational risks are higher than ever. They're more costly, reputational risk, brand risk, and stuff is moving faster than ever before. So what advice do you have to stay effective, lean in like these challenging macroeconomic environments?
There is no silver bullet for sure. I think that we are, building the ship as we navigate. And what is interesting and something that I've learned recently in my experience at ByteDance is that you see L&D as a risk management function.
Yeah.
Which is very different from other places, because usually it is a very happy, thriving. You have you can launch with all these, fun artifacts and so on. So you can run really interesting campaigns. And when you work in an industry where you are talking about sexual abuse, you're talking about trafficking, you're talking about toxicity, bullying, you need to take it seriously. So the tone of voice of everything that you develop from a learning standpoint has to meet that need. But at the same time, you want to engage your learners. You want to make sure that it keeps being attractive and drawing people, right? So it is a very tricky balance between that. What it helps, though, is what you mentioned before. These are very difficult times. This is an elections year, for example. Not only in the U.S., this is called the mega year of elections across the globe. So, of course, you will see a lot of, social media will become and is becoming a major actor in this. So that is already a call for action for all of us, for many of us, to really understand how serious this is and how important it is for us to really be equipped and acquire those skills that can help us navigate this situation. So lucky enough, there is that maturity to engage with content and initiatives, because we know it's basically a make it or break it for many social platforms.
That's a lot of pressure. I mean, and the notion of trust is in your title, right?
Yes.
And it's such an intangible thing. So how do you build on something intangible with a very tangible tool and technology?
Yeah.
How do you do that? How do you?
Yeah.
Because it's no like fun and games. It's a serious business that will have serious consequences on the users and just the world.
Yeah. One of the key words is readiness. For example, in December, when there was this very heated situation between Israel and Palestine and the Gaza war, we needed to react. There was a lot of pressure from different
Right.
parties, and we needed to react. And I remember spending Christmas and New Year's Eve basically trying to build together with a massive
Yeah.
number of people. How do we build a training that really addresses some of the biases of human moderation? So we actually remove some of those barriers that sometimes get in the way without us knowing. And human moderation is all about labeling and tagging content.
Okay.
And sometimes if you leak content that you shouldn't, or maybe you what they call overkill, or you block the content that could or should have been published,
Right.
Creators get upset by that.
Yeah.
But if you are too generous, then users might be affected with some of the content. So we really had to come up with a training that allow some of our moderators to really understand and develop their own biases towards some of the content they were looking at. And we also need to remember that all our moderators, they have their own political views. They all have their different religions, and even if they don't want to, they will judge content in different ways. And at the same time, we need to train our algorithms to also evolve, and kind of the machine learning behind that to get smarter, so it can help filtering some of that content. So those are examples on how social media reacts to some of these. And of course, the war in Ukraine is also another example.
You mentioned something earlier around one of the ways you found success is by arming your teams with like a range of diverse perspectives. Now, I know very little about the technology moderation and all of the really critical work your team does, but my simple mind is recognizing the value, because you're calling out the individual bias of the humans, which it's natural, right? We can like put some constraints, we can educate, but there's probably value in having some diverse biases in that construct that you are operating. There's an element of resilience. The work that you're doing right now is not easy. You're right. Like leadership development program where you take somebody who's never been a leader and then they're like excelling in a people leadership. There's a certain amount of like joy and excitement and potential that a lot of learning practitioners have to do. But there's a lot of learning practitioners who focus on safety in manufacturing facilities, construction sites, like life or death situations. And your team has one of those heavy mandates. I want to understand if you have learned anything about resilience through this. Is it inherent? Is it self-taught? How have you developed your resilience?
Well, when you move across continents, my son is born in Genova, my daughter in Dubai, and of course I've been living in so many places. That just comes with life. But putting that aside, terms like resilience, adaptability, or change, those are different layers or dimensions of learning. So imagine learning as an ecosystem, and there are different seasons coming. So there could be unpredictable weather, and or it could be very nice, transition from one station to the other. What you're using is learning to really react to those situations that come your way as we are exposed to them. Some of us might be a little bit more resistant to those sudden changes, and it might be more difficult maybe to build resilience or adapt to new situations. The key that I found is to gradually expose teams to what they might encounter. So once you go and turn up the volume, and you need like, wow, now is the time of resilience. Like, it is a sudden change, and you need to perform, even if conditions are not ideal. But because of this gradual work that we have done, it becomes a little bit easier. And the other side of the coin is that there is such an amazing reward when you are resilient and there is an outcome of that work. So the more courageous, the more resilience you show in a situation, the more you are getting. So that reinforces that resilient or that adaptability, because like I came out and I'm here, I can do this.
Yeah.
Like that confidence that it builds, that trust stays with you and continues to grow.
So it's not a light switch. It doesn't happen overnight. It's by like scraping your knees, making mistakes. But it sounds like at the core of all of that, you believe it's learning that's powering your ability to become resilient, your ability to adapt. And I love what you're talking about related to like the reinforcing prophecy. I don't know. I can't think of a better way of saying it, where if it was really that hard and you did it and you got through it, maybe you're prepared for the next thing. I will know personally as someone who's had a very unconventional path that what you're saying rings so true to my personal experience. And I think is really important for our audience to hear that, because there's a lot of pressure, especially in like the Instagram era where everything's perfect, everything's polished, and everyone has it all figured out. But that's actually not the reality. There's so much under that proverbial iceberg that goes into it. Going back to this like environment that we're in, where our kids are around the same age, they're kind of growing up in this environment where people, research and the scientists and all the smart people are telling us that attention spans are getting shorter. Is that a good thing? Should we do something about that? What's your opinion?
Shorter attention spans are not helping anchoring significant, relevant learning. And social media companies that I'm aware of are doing research around first of all, there is the knowledge. So the data telling us that very short images or videos are not helping learning. The data is there. And that is what's driving some of these companies to maybe have longer clips. That is also what is driving some of these companies to actually partner with creators, and partner with creators that can show that they have a knowledge on a specific subject matter. So when they are creating content about setting lights, they are actually using or going to a creator that does that maybe for a living, that has that experience. So really improving that, the length of videos is becoming very, very, very important.
There's probably some onus, though, on the people from a learning perspective creating the content. Because I think in the post-pandemic era, like that initial hype of like everything has to be learning is now people are telling us they actually want blended experiences. Here they want to be able to see something like synchronously, but they see that value of community and shared learning and like applying what you're learning on the job. At the same time, learning professionals, like only around 18% of them think they build digital learning well. So there's probably a bit of a like problem there where we need to elevate what those experiences look like practically for people.
Yeah.
And that may help, because we're not going to change. The faucet breaks, I'm going on YouTube. I was watching this TED Talk of the co-founder of Duolingo, and he talks about what tips they learned from social media how do you make learning as addictive as social media? And there's some kind of psychological concepts that likely ring true. Things like notifications, things like branding and having a mascot reinforce the value, what you're doing, give you reminders. But what was really interesting about his talk was that he was like, I'm okay losing to a social media, because I will never be as The reason somebody is playing a mobile game or going on social media, they will never be able to replicate the meaning that people are getting as they're learning a new language. That ability to learn, like so even if I can do 80% of like the psychological, the smart things and the algorithms and how it's designed to make it engaging, I know that person has to want to learn for the 20%. Do you have any advice for those practitioners who are like 18% not so great at digital learning? Like, what can they do to learn some of these things to make their content more relevant and engaging?
Yeah, this is an industry that now is maybe valued at $320 billion, and a lot about e-learning and digital learning. So it is becoming hard and hard to get away from that. If we do the analogy of going into a store, for example, if you go into a store and you enter the store, you did have the work, like you are inside the store. That is similar to what happens to Duolingo. There is an intention. You don't go to Duolingo because you want to see funny videos about cats. Right. There is already an intention I want to learn a language. So that is already like a big driver. So they are capturing people that are thinking very strongly about really learning a language and building that intention across other social media platforms. It will be key to sustain that drive. And this is why that kind of random scrolling that gives me all kind of content that might not be relevant to me might change with AI and with other technologies, because it will become a little bit more personalized, hopefully, and that might help bring some of that intention as you navigate through these networks. But on the other hand, the safety component is crucial. People need to feel that when they navigate these platforms, they are safe. The content is safe. Their children are safe, and this is also a big driver for social media platforms.
It's so important. I appreciate your insight. It is clear, like the belief that you have in starting from the right place, like the intention and how you build career frameworks, the intention behind how you build teams, the intentionality behind how you solve these really gnarly problems that will take many players in the market to solve, is really fascinating. Coupled with your like vulnerable curiosity, I am really glad that we've had this conversation. With that in mind, I have a question, the last question for you, which is something we asked all of our guests, and it's about 3 predictions in your industry, in the learning industry. The first prediction, I want you to be really confident. Something that you're 90% sure about. The second one, something you're like 50% sure about. And the third one, something you're only 10% sure about. So what does your crystal ball say, Daniel?
Around the first one, I think it's very easy to talk about the power of AI and how new kind of personalized experiences should come to life in the short term. So I think that's probably a no-brainer in terms of how we'll shape up the industry going forward.
Okay.
But I'm more keen on the other 2.
Sell it.
I think that a successful L&D professional will be the one that, or teams will be those that will identify what are those interpersonal skills that leaders and emerging talent cannot acquire through AI. And knowing that will make the difference for making this world more human place. So the more we really are caught up into having AI responding all these questions and forgetting about how do we teach difficult conversations, and not because AI told me this is how do you give feedback, but how do you really have that difficult conversation? Because I will know if what you are telling me, you got it from AI. And that will be just your opening. But as soon as we start to have this conversation, that is where you will have to show up. And no AI will show up for you at that time. So how can we really empower leaders and, again, emerging talent to get those skills? And the third, I'm a little bit more probably curious about this, but I think blockchain will become an interesting way of creating trust and transparency around how we manage our careers. Meaning that if you use blockchain to maybe certify a diploma or ensuring that whatever you have done career-wise and your portfolio maybe, there is a way of really securing end-to-end that it is true. Yeah. And when you go to this kind of, as you navigate this global world, it's much easier to show that, you have almost like bulletproof your career path achievements to technologies as blockchain. And I'm talking about cryptocurrency. I mean, it's blockchain is a totally different technology. And that I think will make a difference for and you can see MIT is using that, IBM is using that already. So there are very high-end institutions that are using blockchain for this purpose. So I think that will come more and more.
I'm thinking about in Canada, we have like a doctor shortage or nursing shortage. We have all of these regulations and things that keep experts from other places. And so, holy smoke, something like this.
Yes, you have to do the exam in a different state sometimes and all of that to show so that I think will help to really get that traction and have that talent mobility move faster into the marketplace.
Oh my goodness. Well, let's do this again soon.
Appreciate it.
And we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure, Daniel.
No, for me too. Thank you so much. It was great. Thank you.